What's up everyone, Drea here, and today I am bringing you my full review of the Huawei P20. I've been using this phone for the past couple of weeks, so now I'm going to give you my impressions of it and tell you all the things that I like and dislike about this phone. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, let's get started by talking about the design and build quality of the P20. And in terms of the build quality, I think this feels really great in the hand. If you've seen my unboxing video of this phone, I did mention how it did feel pretty small. I've been used to using bigger phones, and so this one kind of took me a little while to get used to, but once I did, I actually really like the size of it because it's so much easier to operate one-handed, and it actually feels really great. Now this is the pink gold variant that I have here, which is just a beautiful color. It does have sort of a color gradient going on here where it's a little bit darker on top and then gradually gets lighter down at the bottom. Not sure if you could really see that on camera, but it is a really nice design, and even though it's called pink gold, it's really not that pink for any gentleman out there who might think it's too feminine. It's actually a really nice color that they designed here for this phone. But yeah, overall it feels great and solid in the hand, definitely flagship level. It's got a glass back here, so overall it's a really nice looking phone. Moving over to the front, this phone does have a 5.8-inch LCD screen, and even though it's LCD versus OLED like the P20 Pro, I do think the colors are very nice and vibrant, and the screen does get very bright, so you could take it in all lighting conditions, take it outside, and you're still going to be able to see the screen nice and clearly. So no issues there for me. Personally, I don't mind LCD screens. I don't think that all phones have to have OLED necessarily. And with the size of this phone, it is 1080p screen, but it still looks very clear. You don't really see a whole lot of pixelation going on. So overall, I'm very pleased with the quality of the screen. Now, of course, you can see up top this does have a notch, a very iPhone 10 style notch here. And, you know, the notch is a pretty controversial topic these days. Some people hate it, some people don't mind it. My personal opinion of it is kind of twofold. I don't mind the notch in terms of use. It hasn't really bothered me. I don't find it getting in the way a whole lot. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of phones just copying other phones, and this is clearly, you know, a ripoff of the iPhone 10. There's no other way to put it. Which, I mean, Huawei is not the only ones doing it. You know, the OnePlus 6 has it, the LG G7, and it's just a growing trend in the Android world to go with this notch at the top to maximize screen real estate. And personally, I'm just not a fan of it. You know, nobody complains about the S9 and S9 Plus that has a little bit of bezel on top because it looks fine. So I don't know why there's this obsession to maximize the screen real estate to the point where you are ripping off of other phones. But that's just my personal opinion. The other thing is that the whole point of the notch is to make this pretty much an entire screen in front, yet Huawei made the decision to have a bezel at the bottom, a chin at the bottom, and put a fingerprint scanner on it. So in that regard, I don't think that they necessarily needed to have a notch on top. I prefer it to be more symmetrical. But of course, that is something that you can go into the settings. If it really bothers you that much, you can go into the settings and kind of mask the notch by making your notification area blacked out. Now this is an LCD screen, so it doesn't get as black as an OLED, but I do still find that it hides the notch pretty well in that regard. So yeah, that's my personal opinion of it. Even though it really doesn't bother me that much, I just prefer not to have it. I just don't think it's necessary. In terms of the software, this is pretty typical Huawei, running EMUI 8.1 over Android 8.1. So if you've seen the Mate 10 or the Honor View 10 before, then this will look pretty familiar to you. Certainly not a lot has changed, but it is a UI that I've gotten used to using, and I pretty much like it. It's definitely not stock Android, so if you're somebody who loves stock Android, then this will take you a little while to get used to. But I do like it. I've never felt the need to slap on a different launcher on here. That's just, me personally. But there are a few features that I do like. I'm not going to go into it in complete detail because you could probably spend all day talking about EMUI. But there are a few features that I do like, such as the knuckle gestures, like being able to tap your knuckle and take a screenshot. Much easier than having to hold down the power and volume down button at the same time. And I also like if you go into an app and you can just swipe your knuckle across to do split screen mode, and you can go into another app. So just a couple of the features of EMUI that I do like, that makes it easy for use. Also the navigation keys, as you can see down here, I have chosen not to use the navigation buttons, and you can come in here into System and System Navigation, and you can choose what you want here. You can have navigation keys, as is typical for most other Android phones, but I really like this ability to use the fingerprint scanner as my navigation keys. So pretty much it's just swipe across for your recent apps, or tap once to go back, or you could just hold down to go to your home screen. And so it's pretty easy to use, and I really do like, since they did put the fingerprint scanner up front, I like that feature, and again makes it a lot easier for one-handed use. So those are some of my favorite features of EMUI. Now let's move on and talk about the cameras of the P20, because this is one of the major talking points of this phone. Now I'll start off first with the front-facing camera. This does have a 24 megapixel camera up front. Now, for me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Huawei's front-facing cameras, mostly because they do apply a beauty mode to all their shots. So when you take a selfie, the skin comes out very smooth in an unnatural sort of way. I do prefer front cameras that pull in a lot of detail, and unfortunately with this one, even when you take off the beauty mode, it still applies some level of beauty to it and smooths out everything, and you don't get a lot of details there. So I mean, the selfie cameras are okay, but they're not the best. I've certainly seen better ones on other phones. But that's just something that Huawei does. It seems like on all their devices. At least it was the same thing with my Honor View 10. It did the same thing. Moving on to the rear cameras, however, this does have a 12 megapixel RGB camera with a f1.8 aperture, and a 20 megapixel monochrome camera with an f1.6 aperture. And this takes some pretty great photos here. There's a lot of different shooting modes on this, so certainly anybody could have a lot of fun here using this camera. You've got slow-mo, panorama, you can just take straight black and white shots. So there's a lot going on with this camera. Mostly I stick to the auto mode, or switch it up to the portrait mode for some great shots. Now the real selling point here for this phone is in low light photography. Switching over to the night mode, this takes some amazing low light photos, probably some of the best I've seen amongst all the phones that I've used. And what it does, it really brightens up a shot and pulls in a lot of details, especially at night. And I've kind of been toying around with it, taking shots in my automatic mode at night, and then taking the same shot in night mode to compare it. And you do get so much more detail when you switch over to that night mode, which takes a 4-second long exposure of it. So I think that right there is probably my favorite thing about this phone is the cameras. It just takes some amazing quality photos. So as always, I do have some samples to show you. So please feel free to let me know in the comments what you think about the camera. And another thing that's worth mentioning, I forgot, I skipped over, is that this phone does have AI attached to it. So if you point it at something, if you point it at, say, a flower, it'll show up as a flower. Or if you point it at a bush, it'll show up as greenery. It can pull in, it can detect the blue sky, it can detect food. So there's just a whole lot of different uses for that AI in terms of recognizing the scene you're shooting. And again, it depends on what kind of photos you like, because what the AI does is saturates colors a lot. So if you point it at a tree, for example, it's really going to make that tree look very green. Some people like it, some people don't. It depends on the type of photographer you are. Personally, for the most part, I like the AI and I like the vibrant colors that come from it. If you feel like the AI is too aggressive, you can always turn it off, so you just get a more natural looking shot. But overall, I really like it. So yeah, let me show you some sample photos and let me know what you think about it and in the comments. And yeah, let's go ahead and see that. So again, those are just some sample shots that I took. I would love to hear your opinion of them in the comments. But yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite camera phones that I have used. Now I know there's been a lot of attention given to the P20 Pro because of its triple camera setup. But certainly this the standard P20 is not a phone that should be overlooked. The quality of the pictures is pretty great in my opinion, and I mean, I understand why it's being overshadowed by the P20 Pro. I mean, it's the first phone to come out with triple cameras. But still, this is definitely not a phone that should be overlooked. And I think this is one of the best cameras in the market. So another area I did want to talk about is the audio quality of this phone. Now, this the standard P20 does have a single bottom firing speaker down here, as opposed to the P20 Pro that has the dual audio setup. But to be honest, this is quite frankly, I would say the best audio I've heard from a single bottom firing speaker. And that's kind of both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because, as I've said, it's the best quality I've heard from a single bottom firing speaker. It gets more bass than I would have imagined and sounds a lot better than most other phones that I've heard with just a single speaker. The reason why I say it's also a bad thing is because once you listen to it, it also just makes you itch for that dual speaker setup. Because if it sounds this good with just one speaker, I can only imagine what it would sound like if it had dual speakers. The Pro model has the dual speakers, and I really do wish that Huawei put the dual speakers on the standard P20 as well. But like I said, the sound quality coming out is just pretty amazing. It does get more bass than I imagined, so I really like it. The other thing is too with the internal, with the headphones, and you do get headphones in the box here. USB Type-C if you notice, because this phone does not have a headphone jack. So I know there's going to be a lot of people who that angers, but for me it's not a big deal. And these headphones work really well. Now, I do like the audio quality that comes from the headphones as well. It's actually, I would say, on par with my HTC U11. which is some of the best audio quality. So I really like it. And the other thing is, once you have the headphones plugged in, you can go into the sound settings and go on, and it has Dolby Atmos. And you can go ahead and change the settings on here. So right now it's set to default on the smart settings, which can detect whether you're watching a movie or listening to music, and it can kind of tweak the sound quality based on that. Or if you want more control of it, you can either click on movie or click on music. And going into the music settings, you do have these different modes that you can switch onto. So depending on what sound you prefer, you can switch the mode. And you also can take manual control of the equalizer here. So I think it does have some pretty great audio settings on this phone, which I really enjoyed playing with this. Alright, so I'm just about wrapping up here, but I do want to talk about the battery life of this phone. Now the P20 does have a 3400 milliamp hour battery, so it's quite a bit smaller than the 4000 milliamp hour battery found on the P20 Pro. Now this one, you do get some decent battery life out of it. I have been able to get through a full day of use. It does give me a somewhat mediocre 4.5 hours to 5 hour screen on time, typically. So it's definitely not the best that I've used. For example, the OnePlus 5T with a slightly smaller 3300 milliamp hour battery, I could get 6, sometimes even 7 hours screen on time with that phone. So this one, it's definitely not the best that I've used, so I was a little bit disappointed in the performance of the battery. But like I said, I have been able to get through a full day of use from it. Also note that it does have supercharge, so that helps a lot because the supercharge is pretty fast. So you could top up, you can plug it in for just about a half an hour and be good to go for the rest of the day. So that is a nice feature to have, especially since the battery is a little bit smaller, again, than the P20 Pro. So that pretty much covers everything. Now, I do like this phone. Generally, I think it's a great device. And over in the US, it costs, you can get this on Amazon for under $600 typically, around $570, $580. I've seen it through Amazon, and I will put a link up in the description. But for the price of that, it's definitely a great device that I would absolutely recommend. It does come with 128 gigabytes of storage. So absolutely a contender there. One thing that I have to mention that I don't really care for on this phone is these Huawei devices do some pretty crazy battery optimization, which might sound like a good thing, but it's not, because what it does is it shuts down some apps. Like, for example, I use Google Allo quite a bit, and I realized when I was using this phone that I wasn't getting notifications whenever I got a message. So someone would be sending me a message and I would have no idea, and I'd be missing them. And I couldn't figure out why, and so I had to do research, and it was all these crazy battery optimizations going on here, shutting down the notifications. It was really only that app that I noticed the problem, but still, when somebody's sending me a message, I would like to get the notification of it. So I had to go into the settings, and there are like 3 different areas that I have to play around with. The app settings, I have to go into the notification settings and make sure that it's set to priority. I had to go into the app settings and tell it to ignore battery optimization. For example, going into the app settings here and then clicking on this settings. You can do advanced special access and then click on ignore battery optimization, and I allowed it there. And then you still have to go into the battery settings here with the app launch and make sure that it's set to manage manually and keep it running in the background. So there was a lot of hoops of fire I had to jump through to be able to get my notifications from that app. So again, that's something that really, it took me a few days to figure out. I wasn't pleased with it. I don't like the fact that there are apps where it's just keeping notifications from you. So that is my least favorite thing about this device, and I wish it would be something that Huawei would fix, hopefully in an update or in their future devices. But that's pretty much the biggest negative I have to say about it. Overall, I did get the notifications working, so it's been fine since then. And overall, I think it's a great device. And even though it's not sold through retailers in the US, I do think it's something you should look into if you're here. Again, the camera is just top quality. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on it. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so please let me know what you think about this phone. If you've used any other Huawei phones before, has it been a good experience for you or has it not? So let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video.